Hey guys, it's Michelle. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my favorite books of 2018. Happy New Year! It is January 1st. I wanted to wait for today to do this because I just wanted to start off with a very positive video. So this is it. I have 10 books that I narrowed down, and it took me forever for my favorite books of 2018, but I do have 3 honorable mentions. So I just couldn't, I couldn't quite narrow it down to 10. So I'm just going to go into a little bit why I love these books so much. For the most part, these are in no particular order except for the last 2. The last 2 are definitely my top 1 and 2 spots. So I just want to make that clear, and I will readdress that again when we get there, but let's just get into it with the honorable mentions. So my first honorable mention is Starfish by Akemi Dawn Bowman. I read this book because it was nominated for the Morris Debut Award for YA fiction, and I had never heard of it, and I couldn't believe I had never heard of it. So my library got it, and I read it on ebook at work. And holy crap. I haven't stopped thinking about this book all year. This is a book about a girl who is emotionally abused by her mother. Her mother is white, and the main character is mixed race with Asian American. So the mother is completely awful to not only her daughter, but she has 2 siblings. And it was just so emotional, and I cannot tell you how much I have not stopped thinking about this book. It has great anxiety rep. It has great art rep. Like, the main character is an artist, and she goes on this road trip with a boy, but it's not all about romance, which is what I love. It was really about her discovering herself, and then something happens to her little brother that just like brings them all together, and there are so many revelations in this book. It's just amazing, and I haven't stopped thinking about it, and I absolutely recommend it to everyone. So this was my first honorable mention. Starfish. Do it. My second honorable mention is a book I heard of just solely through Chelsea from Chelsea Darling Reads, and honestly this is all her fault because I wouldn't have read it without her, and that is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I thought I was not going to like this book because I am not a big fan of the hate to love trope, and that is exactly 100% what this book is about, but I loved it. I flew through it. I loved everything about it. This is about Lucy and Josh, whose companies have merged together, and they are in the same position for their bosses. So they work together every day right next to each other, and they hate each other until all of a sudden they don't hate each other anymore. And it's just lovely. It's really well written and fast paced, which is something I want, and it has smut. So I cannot tell you how big of a surprise this book was, and it was just something I never, like, I sincerely did not think I was going to like this, and I loved it so much. It's the second of my honorable mentions for the year, so thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, Sally Thorne. This book was a pleasant surprise to me this year, so thank you. And the last of my honorable mentions is one that came out pretty recently, and I also hadn't stopped thinking about it. I read the audiobook of this, which was absolutely the best choice, and that is Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is the first book by Courtney Summers I've ever read, and oh boy, was this a good one. I listened to the audiobook out of the suggestion by almost everyone on BookTube to listen to the audiobook, and it was a full cast podcast style, and it goes back and forth between Sadie and a podcast, and it was hard to listen to. It was, wow. Trigger warnings for pedophilia and murder and not pretty things to listen to or read about, but once again, this book has stuck in my mind since I read it in September. I loved it. It's fairly short, but it packs such a deep punch. It's just, I want to read it again, but I know I have to be like in the right mindset to read it again. So it's just, it was beautiful in a really harrowing way. So if you haven't picked up Sadie yet for some reason, 100% listen to the audiobook. 100% give it a try. It was just amazing. And now we were getting into the top 10 of 2018. The first two I don't have the physical copy of yet, but I will. So the first one is Again But Better by Christine Riccio. I had the great honor of getting an e-arc of this book through NetGalley, I think, or one of them, I don't know. And I couldn't believe when I was approved. I tried to get an arc of this at Y'all Fest this year and it just didn't work. This book actually comes out in May of 2019, so I'm a little ahead of the game. But basically, this is about a character named Shane who has done college all wrong, and she goes on a study abroad trip to London where she has vowed to take risks and do everything differently, and then things happen. She meets a boy and she gets a chance to really start over, which I'm not gonna spoil anything because I'm not gonna do that. But what I wanted to happen in this book happened, and I'm so glad. I'm not gonna lie to you, it took me a while to get into the writing of this book because it was so cheery and over explanation points, and it was like I was not at that level of the writing where this book was. So once I got into it, I was into it, and it had a lot of pop culture references, which I love in my contemporary. So I got like giddy every time she mentioned a book, anytime she mentioned a song. I added songs that were talked about in this book to my actual playlist. Like, it was so good, and I'm so lucky I got an arc. And I'm not just saying it because she's a booktuber. Like, she's not a booktuber that I follow religiously. I'm saying this because this was a good book. It was something different. The writing was good once you get into it. So I am not just saying it to like pump her up. She doesn't need me. I'm nothing. It was amazing. So absolutely give Again But Better a chance in 2019. It was great. It made my top 10 of 2018. It hasn't even come out yet. So amazing. Next book on my list is Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is Taylor Jenkins Reid's first book, and it is the last book I read by her. This book's affected me in ways I couldn't even imagine. I don't know what happened, but it affected me so much. Basically, this is about a couple that get married, and 9 days later, he dies. So she has to deal with living without him, facing her new mother-in-law who she has never met and doesn't know anything about her, and just what do you do after the love of your life dies? I really love the relationship between her and her mother-in-law. Like, for some reason, that was the heart of this story, and that was what really I attached to so much. I thought it was beautiful. They went from hating each other to really leaning on each other, and it was just so good. And her husband, who you get to know like in flashbacks, was amazing. And I'm sitting on the couch, the last line had me bawling, and my husband's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, no. It affected me so much. It was just beautiful. You can't tell that it's her debut. It's just so well written, and I just loved the story so much. Like, I cannot stop thinking about this book. And it's not that it's super original or anything. It just, like, the way it was written, how she fleshed out the characters, how she made the relationship between the main character and the mother-in-law, just, I don't know. It just did it for me. It makes me emotional just thinking about this book, and I highly recommend it for anyone if you're starting to get into adult fiction. It's definitely adult fiction, and it was just beautiful and amazing, and I loved it. and it's one of her least popular, and I don't know why, because I loved it. So Forever Interrupted. Taylor Jenkins Reid, just like, you can't go wrong with her. So the next book on my list is The Nowhere Girls by Amy Reed. I actually read this book in the beginning of 2018, and it has stuck with me throughout the entire year. Basically, the premise of this book is that a new girl in town moves into the house of a girl who was essentially run out of town after she accused the popular boys of rape. And then she goes on a mission with two other misfits to take down the popular boys who have been accused of rape not once, but several times, and they call themselves the Nowhere Girls. First of all, this book was feminist as fuck, which is something I'm always looking for in YA literature, so thank you, Amy Reed, for that. The second is that although it was feminist, it looked at other girls' perspectives of feminism. So there was a black girl that said, this is white feminism and I don't fit in here at all. And there was also a girl who was religious and was like, they don't understand, I don't need this in my life, I have something else. So I had never like step back and look at feminism that way, and I just thought it was brilliant and amazing and so empowering. And I like that Amy Reed was like, so this is why feminism isn't for me, or this is why I don't fit into this feminism. And it was just something I had never thought about, so kudos to her, because it was amazing. But basically, again, for this book, it was a 4-star read for me until I got to the last 2 chapters, which completely destroyed me. They completely destroyed me. I, once again, am sitting on the couch sobbing. It's a powerful book. It is trigger warnings for rape, for sexual assault, for just like gross boy jokes. I don't know. There's a lot of trigger warnings, but it was amazing and I want to reread it, and I cannot wait for anything else Amy Reed comes out with. And it hasn't gotten a lot of hype anywhere, on BookTube, on Goodreads, on anything. It was a quiet book. It was so powerful and I'm so excited I picked it up this year, and it has stuck with me throughout the entire year. So thank you for that, Amy Reed. The Nowhere Girls. Amazing. The next book on my list is another hard-hitting contemporary, and that is Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake. I read this book in one day. It was powerful. It like hurt. You get to the end and it resolves itself and you're still like, ow, because everything that the main character went through is just rough. So basically this is a story about a girl who has a twin brother, and her twin brother is accused of raping his girlfriend and also her best friend. So from the start, it is just, it puts you in there, and she has to come to terms with the fact that her brother isn't this perfect person that she thought he was the whole time. It also deals with her relationship with her parents, who are coming in defense of their son, and she's like, wait a second, we're blaming the victim. And it's just like, it's complicated and it's beautiful and it's really kind of hard to read. So I don't recommend this for everyone. If you can't, it's not, I don't know, it's not super pretty. Like, the writing is beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it's not a pretty story. It's much like Sadie. It's not a pretty story, but it's an important story. It's a beautiful story in the end. Like, you learn so much about what has happened to this main character in her own life with her own experience, and it's just like heartbreaking and amazing. And if you can read hard-hitting YA contemporaries, Girl Made of Stars is for you. Ashley Herring Blake, I haven't read anything else by her, but I'm picking up her other stuff immediately. This book was just another silent gem this year. It was amazing. The next book on my list is a second in a series, and that is Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman. I was super surprised with myself when I picked up Scythe, because I am not one for science fiction, fantasy, anything like that. So I couldn't believe when I was in the middle of Scythe in 2016 or 17 and was loving it so much. So I was so excited for Thunderhead, and it did not disappoint me at all. This is the second in a series of, I think, trilogy. I know the Toll comes out in 2019. Cannot wait, Neil Shusterman, let's go. It continues on after the events of Scythe, and I don't want to get too into it because it is the second in the series and I don't want to ruin anything if you haven't read Scythe. But it is just such a smooth transition after Scythe, and although I do think Scythe was better, this still delivered a punch, and it makes you think about your own mortality and what if this actually happened and everything, and we get new characters and the ending. I was reading the end and we get to the final like big thing that happens that we are left on cliffhanger, and I'm sitting there with the book closed and I'm just like, what happened? It was so good. If you haven't tried this series yet for whatever reason, I'm telling you as like a contemporary only reader, this is sci-fi fantasy and it is amazing. Neil Shusterman is the Stephen King of YA. I have said this for years, and he's just, it's so amazing. So definitely pick up Scythe. Thunderhead will not disappoint you. The Toll comes out soon. Let's do it. The next book is another book by Neil Shusterman and his son Jared Shusterman, and I got an arc of this and just had to pick up the physical copy, and I actually got it signed at Y'all Fest, and that is Dry by Neil and Jared Shusterman. This is a not so dystopian novel about something that could maybe potentially happen in Southern California one day, and that is the water literally runs out in Southern California, and these kid survivors are looking for water, and that is the only thing they're doing. They go through basically a camp and they try to escape the camp. They meet up with each other, and there's like this weird kid who is like selling water for weird stuff, and it's just, it was so scary because it's something that could 100% basically happen, and by the end of it I like chugged a bottle of water. It was so good because I felt like it was so real, and it was a surprise to me because Neil Shusterman just like takes these scary things that we don't like to think about and puts them in your face, and you're like, you think about it and you're like, wow, this actually could happen. What if the water ran out? What are the solutions? What do we actually do? It did have an amazing ending. I thought everything was like, it finished really well and really strong, which is what I wanted. And I just love how he's not afraid to like think about these things that could actually happen and shove it in your face and be like, what would you do? What's the solution? So this is why I made the top 10 this year. I love Neil Shusterman, obviously. It's, this was amazing, 100%. The next book on my list is a little polarizing, and I 100% acknowledge that it is polarizing. This is my experience with this book, so that is all. That is Leah on the Offbeat by Becky Albertalli. I loved this book. I might even go so far to say that I loved it more than Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, and I loved that book. I think I loved Leah on the Offbeat so much because I saw so much of myself in Leah, and if you didn't like Leah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, because I saw so much of myself in her character, in the stuff that she has gone through, and it was just, if you don't know, this is a companion novel to Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda and the Creekwood series. This is the last we're getting from Creekwood. So it follows, after the whole Simon Blue thing, Leah and her coming to terms with being bisexual, with being fat, with being a little bit outside of the group that she has with Simon, and just falling in love with someone that she didn't think she was going to fall in love with. And I understand why people don't like this. I understand why it's a little controversial. What she does at one point, I completely understand why people are mad about it, and I don't condone it. Like, I think it was shitty as well, but for me, I was able to look beyond that because I saw so much of myself in Leah, and I just thought it was so well written. I love Becky Albertalli and the way she does put pop culture into her books, and I know a lot of people hate that. I understand that people like don't like the pop culture references in her books, but it helps me connect to the characters more, and that's why I loved this book so much. I love Leah. She's my Slytherin queen. Like, I like this so much. I know a lot of people didn't, but I stand by it. I stand by Leah on the Offbeat. Next book is History Is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera. This book was a complete surprise to me, and it's one, again, that I have thought about all year. This is a book about Griffin, and his ex-boyfriend dies in an accident, and he comes to terms with it with his ex-boyfriend's new boyfriend. So it is complicated. It was beautiful. It was a little controversial at some points. Like, one thing that happened between Griffin and the new boyfriend really I did not like, and it is like resolved, and I understand why Adam put it in there, but I just thought it was very well written. I loved the story, and Griffin, just like when Griffin goes back in time and tells the story of him and his dead ex, it just like was heartbreaking, and I still think about it. And I just, once again, he is an author who puts in pop culture references as well. That's why Becky and Adam like wrote a book together. It totally makes sense. But this like hurt my heart, and it was queer, and it was inclusive, and it was just like something I didn't think I would like. And when I was putting together my list, I was surprised that like this kept going. It was like started with 18, and I was like, no, this is going to the top 10 because it was so deep and meaningful. It wasn't perfect, which I think like Leah makes it that much better because it wasn't perfect. Like, I can see the flaws in this book, and I still am able to forgive it because it meant a lot to me when I read it. So History Is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera is the only book I have read by him as a standalone author, and it was amazing. I can't wait to get into the rest of his book. Okay, y'all, we have made it to the top 2. Now, these are very distinct top 2 places, 100% my top 2, and I had been going back and forth between like which one should be in the 1 and 2, but this is definitely 100% how I feel. So, 2, probably no surprise, and this is going to be in a lot of people's top of 2018, and that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So my story with this book is that my coworker was like, hey, if you're looking for trashy, like, but really good book, this is it, and handed it to me. And I was like, okay, cool, free book, I'll get to it eventually, and put it on my bookshelf. And then I was scouring my digital library, and I saw it, and I just happened to put it on hold. And a couple weeks later, I completely forgot about it, and I was put on hold. I got the hold of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I was at work, and I started reading it. And then I was off work, and I was reading it on my phone. Like, I couldn't even get up and be bothered to like stop reading off my phone and pick up the physical copy that I knew I had. And Castleman, my husband's trying to talk to me, and I'm like, I can't. I finished that book that night. As you know, because almost everyone has read this book. This book is amazing, and you don't expect it to be. Like, when my coworker described it to me as trashy but good, I was like, okay, but like that's kind of exactly what it is. This is a story about a old Hollywood starlet, Evelyn Hugo, who decides to finally tell her story to this not so well-known journalist named Monique, and Monique is trying to decide like why she was the one who was chosen to tell Evelyn's story. And when things come together at the end and you learn about her 7 husbands and you learn about the other romance, it's just beautiful. And it was so surprising who she ends up with. Like, I was not expecting this at all. I was thinking, you know, what you were thinking because of the title. And this was my first Taylor Jenkins read, and ever since then she has cemented herself as one of my favorite adult fiction writers. Like, this book just like meant a lot to me. I know it has meant a lot to a lot of people, and it is just so good. It's so hyped, and it deserves all the hype that it gets. Like, 100% was amazing and almost took my top spot, but it's just like something I can't wait to reread. Even though I know everything that's going to happen now, it doesn't even matter because it's so ugh. And I know, you know, if you've read it, you're just like, it's amazing. So thank you, Taylor Jenkins Reid, for writing this book. And because of this book, you are now one of my favorite adult fiction writers, just because of this book. So I know this book has meant so much to a lot of people. It means a lot to me. So thank you. And my top book of 2018 is actually kind of a surprise to me. I 100% read this book because of the cover, which is something I am guilty of doing a lot, but okay. It completely surprised me. It's one of those, again, that I read at work on ebook when I was supposed to be working, and instead I was reading this book, and it just like means so much to me, and I can't even like I'm not going to be able to articulate why very well, so I apologize for that. But this is Autobiography by Christina Lauren. This was my first ever book read by Christina Lauren. It's their first young adult fiction book. Normally they write adult smut, and they went into the young adult genre, and I had never heard of this duo before. I thought it was one author named Christina Lauren. Like, I didn't know anything about them or this book or anything, and this book blew me away. If you have ever seen me in like Chelsea and Julie's live shows, I'm always in the comments yelling about people who yelling at you to read autobiography. I'm just yelling in the comments. I'm like, why isn't anyone talking about or reading autobiography? And it's my #1 book of the whole year. So Autobiography is a story about Tanner, who is bisexual and moves from California to Utah into a Mormon like centric location. And so he is essentially put back into the closet and is passing as a straight guy until he meets his writing TA, Sebastian, who is like the #1 prime example of a Mormon male teenager. He is like won awards. I don't know anything about the Mormon religion, but I know he's like the prime example of Mormon teenage boy, and he's about to go on his like mission where he brings Mormonism to other states. Okay, whatever. That's whatever. The important thing is that this is a love story, and it's so slow burn and beautiful and heartbreaking. And when things happened towards the end, I was like sitting at my desk at work like crying. I was crying. This Tanner and Sebastian and their relationship and the way it is written and just everything about this book is so beautiful. I can't even describe it to you well enough. I can't like be articulate about it because it is so important to me and I love it so much, and I'm like about to cry. I'm getting emotional about a stupid book, but it's just like was very important to me, and Tanner and Sebastian are very important to me, and I just like wish more people knew about this book. And I don't know why I'm crying about a book, but I'm afraid if people read this, they're not going to like it as much as I did, and it's just like going to kill me. But yeah, I really love this book, obviously, but I like can't even tell you why. So that is it. That is the top 10 and 3 honorable mentions of my favorite books of 2018. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great 2019. Bye!